Hello and welcome to the Ramen Profitable Podcast. My name is Atish Mazumdar and I'm here with my co-pilot, the great and powerful Chris Scott. And this is the podcast about testing out your ideas, taking your first steps, and really overcoming those obstacles on the way to entrepreneurship. Enjoy.
I'm helping a friend edit his feature, and it's an interesting process. Working with someone on their first feature. After completing my first feature and having my own experiences and trying to do things that will motivate his decisions, because I just know that he's kind of wrong in some aspects. And, you know, it's tough to, because, you know, so this guy made this film in 2012.
This has already been made.
Yeah, he shot it in 2012, and then he had like some personal issues. He got a divorce. His editor like crapped out on him, and they never got a chance to finish the whole movie. And it kind of now he helped me on Downshift.
Okay,
and he was like, "Oh, I should finish my movie." So then he got motivated to actually finish the movie. So the movie's finally all edited, but now he's just trying to figure out how to make the audio sound better, how to make the color look better.
Well, so this might be like a really rookie question because I don't know anything about this, but it's like, is that actually possible to do on something that's been shelved for 8 years?
Oh yeah. There's
Really?
definitely, especially now with how editing's going, you can definitely make things sound better.
Oh, okay.
And I guess it depends on what you want the look to be, because the way they shot it pretty like fairly nicely.
Okay.
If that's the proper way to say that.
What do you mean by that?
Like it was there's only a few parts where it's like poorly lit, but like it's consistent with its lighting, and it's good. It's solid. It's consistent. I think consistent is sometimes more beneficial to a film than like good here and then one really bad one.
Oh, sure. So like, as opposed to, you can have one really great set piece and one really great shot, but then if it's like counterbalanced against something that looks kind of garbage, it's probably preferable to have just an average, like, good.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I do find with independent films, I find this stuff that I do too. It's like there's always one moment where like a really bad actor shows up in a scene, and it kind of just takes everybody out of the moment. Or this one shot is weird, or this one edit is weird, and it kind of just takes everyone out. If people have to stop and go, "Huh? What was that?"
Yeah,
then it's not good for your movie.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because are you aware currently that Matthew McConaughey is pushing a book?
No. I know he's been like talking to everybody. Is that what it's for?
That's what it's for. Okay, because all of a sudden, like, I wasn't, I've kind of been, I've been listening to a lot of books lately. I haven't been up on my podcast game. It may surprise you or not surprise you. And in fact, this might be good stuff for another mini episode. But I've been off the Rogan podcast, which is... Chris is not in a concerted effort, as in like, oh, screw the Rogan podcast, like, not anything like that.
It just seems like so much work. Like you were comparing Lord of the Rings and what was the other one? The other fantasy movie that you don't like?
I
don't remember, but it wasn't that good. Maybe it was. Who knows?
I mean, I didn't like Blade Runner, if that's...
No. It was another fantasy movie. You were comparing Lord of the Rings and something else because you thought Lord of the Rings was just such a drudge to get through. Maybe
it was
Harry
a drag.
Potter.
It was a
It's
drag.
It's not a drag. It's the hero's journey. No, it's not.
Dude, it's a drag. It's a drag.
No, it's not. But like a Joe Rogan podcast, so it's like 3 hours an episode, right?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, but when your workday is basically a monotony of, whatever, it really kind of helps pass the time. No, okay, so we'll address this in a mini episode, my gripe with recent Rogan. But in short, actually there are many gripes I have with recent Rogan, but it's not as though I've been doing like a specific, like I haven't been listening or anything like that.
You haven't done an official breakup yet.
Right, I haven't done an official breakup, and before anybody starts speculating, or before you start speculating, it's not for any reasons like. Actually, it's because more of what society has done to it as opposed to what he has done to it. It has nothing to do with him. Actually, it has more to do with the fact that like all of a sudden, it's politicized, like it's turf. But I started listening to the Rogan podcast back around episode 400 or 500. For context, I think they're in 1400s now, so nearly 1,000 different from, or 1,000 have been done since I started listening. So I started back in college around sometime. And it used to be just a lot of like comedians shooting the shit, or like, oh, here's this interesting doctor who knows about breath work and stuff like that. Let's talk to him. Or here's this, I don't know. Here's this guy who's making this movie about this really kind of unique species in the jungle. Like, let's talk to him, or, whatever. It was stuff like that. And now all of a sudden, every single episode, every single one, has something to do with coronavirus, has something to do with, I don't know. And people listen to these episodes, and then I have to see an article basically about how, oh, Joe Rogan is something this about trans or this about, whatever. And it's just like, it's gotten politicized. Hold on, I have to go close this door. But yeah, so basically it's like there is not, it used to be just this thing that I would listen to and it would be kind of funny or pretty interesting or something like that. But now people who don't listen to the podcast have opinions about whether or not he should be able to have certain guests on, or whether or not this, that, whatever. So basically what I'm saying is that politics is ruining good things in my life in general. Like everything. I get text messages now from both sides of the aisle constantly, like near constantly. Like
Have you
everything
voted?
is just, huh?
Have you voted?
I voted. Yeah, I already sent in my ballot. I don't know what they want from me.
I wonder, because I know as soon as I sent my ballot in and I saw that it was checked in and like accepted, I stopped getting all the texts. So I wonder if I'm on some special list.
Maybe. I think it's also because Arizona is like actually a battleground state this time around.
I know, it's interesting.
Yeah, so now it's like I'm just getting hammered by both sides, and
Well, you're in a different county too. That's probably what it is. Even though your jury duty doesn't know that.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if I ever brought this up on the podcast, but thankfully somebody with a brain like read because they said, don't call the number. Like, even if you can't show up to jury duty, don't call the number. Just fill out the survey and we'll take care of it. But then I filled out the survey, and weeks and weeks and weeks kind of went by and nothing changed. And I was like, oh my God, am I going to have to go to jury duty in a completely different county? Like, this is going to be so annoying. And then finally, maybe 2 weeks before my scheduled date, they said like, oh, it's been you've been removed from service. So I was like, oh, thank God.
Oh, nice.
That got me super worried. But yeah, I basically, I know that politics is important, and I know that voting is important, and I know that all this kind of stuff is important right now, especially. But why must everything revolve around this now? And I think that may be one of the, not to get too preachy on a subject that I know very little about, but ultimately it's like, wouldn't we think that me and my neighbor have more in common than we have apart? Like the fact that we afford to live in the same area, the fact that we both drive cars, the fact that we, whatever. It's like, in fact, as it turns out, in a coincidence, my neighbor is a guy who I used to train jiu-jitsu with, but that's entirely separate. So it's like, you would think that we all have more in common than we have apart, but now we have some sort of thing where it's like we have a divisionary rule that says, oh, obviously, if you're voting for this person, you're miles apart from the other person, and they're totally different, and you can't relate to them at all. And I think that that's bad.
I think it's bad too. I think that's something that's been heightened these last 4 years with this presidency. Yeah, I think he's very into divisiveness. Yeah. Also, I do think that there's like in theory, in practice, and not in practice, but in I guess in theory, we have more in common with our neighbor than we don't.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of people that have the opposite opinion on that. How, if depending on like in the suburbs, in a rural city, like depending on what neighborhood you live in, people do judge their neighbors for not, being one of them, for not growing up in that neighborhood, for being a different race, being a different religion. It's like it'd be nice if that were true, but it's just not in actuality.
Yeah, that's why, in a sense, I kind of think that, and I think you could probably fall under this category yourself, but it's like, in that sort of sense, I kind of feel like I come from the future. Not obviously in the literal sense, but in the sense that, I'm exactly half white and exactly half not white. And I simultaneously have a steady job in what used to be a red state, and like all the stuff that would maybe mark you as like a conservative, but then at the same time I've got tattoos and I have liberal sensibilities and all this kind of stuff. It's like, I think I'm from the future where all of this prejudice and whatever has kind of gone away. This is all what this is going to look like in 40 years. You know what I mean? Nobody cares about tattoos anymore. Nobody cares about all this kind of stuff. Hopefully we get to a place where we can stop caring so much about race. I know it seems like that's a far cry because, my God, like, recent events make it seem like we are actually way, like, earlier than we thought we were based on, like, oh, it's 2020. It's been so many years since the civil rights movement. But it's like, shit. I mean, how much progress was really made? We're not sure. But I think it's kind of, I don't want to make a bold statement like OJ when he said that he doesn't identify as any race or something. He's post-racial. He's just OJ. But it's like, God. I think I'm from the future. This is what we're all going to look like one day. So we should all, I mean, Chris and I already look alike.
Yeah, we look like cousins.
Exactly. So it's like, we should embrace thy neighbor and whatever.
Right. I also think there is something, going back to Joe Rogan.
All roads point back to Rogan.
all roads point back to Rogan. Just this, starting off as, I was thinking about this earlier this week. It's just how big is too big?
Yeah.
Like, when do you stop being you and when do you start being part of a machine?
Yep.
How much influence do you have? At what point does your influence going to, basically change a country, an opinion,
yes,
a class of people,
right?
An opinion about something scientific, because you have this power that you didn't want it. Of course you didn't want it, but you have it. And like a refusal to acknowledge that power, or not taking a chance to recognize it and, I think, deal with it in a way that's, fair and not fair and balanced, because that's very Fox Newsies. But
yeah, that's a slogan now.
Yeah. So that, I don't know. I think what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get what you're trying to say. I think that's definitely good. We should definitely do a mini-sode on that, because I've got a lot of thoughts, and I think you're on the money with exactly like what it comes down to is influence, right?
Right.
And that's why it's all in the same time. We've never been so empowered with technology, or even with, in certain cases, with money, or with time, really, because like none of us have to go out and work a plow right now, basically. Right. So we've never been more empowered with time and all that kind of stuff. And yet, depression and self-consciousness and things like this have never been higher. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is, at least with the younger generations, the Zoomers and all that, it's like it all has to do with the influence that other people have over you. And then you're comparing yourself to people that you see on Instagram or whatever. And then you think that your life isn't enough, or you're doing something wrong, or you're not who you want to be, or something like that. It's completely odd. But that this is all dipping into that social dilemma thing. So you sent me, let's bring this up. You sent me a cryptic text yesterday.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. You sent me a cryptic text yesterday, and you said, "Have we talked about burned bridges?"
Have we?
I was like, I don't think we have, but now I'm super curious what you're referring to. What's going on, Chris?
Well, it requires a lot of stories, but I don't know, just
because I definitely, actually, very recently, I have some life experience with this as well. So I'm curious where your head's at.
Well, I had a conversation earlier this week with a fellow filmmaker here in town that's more of a technical filmmaker. In that sense, he's like more of a cinematographer. He likes to take video more so than tell stories.
Got it. Okay. It's more about the like how it looks and all this kind of stuff as opposed like the technical capacities as opposed to, what I'm shooting and why I'm shooting it and all that kind of stuff.
Right. He's all about the camera and the lighting and like what lights are we using. Like the legit brand of light is important to him. The legit brand of camera and the type of lens and the focal length. Is it an 85 or 102? It's like he's very, in that sense, that's a good skill to have for, certain crew members on a set.
Sure.
I like to focus more on story and characters and blah, 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 blah. All the stuff that people watch.
Yeah.
But he was, I guess somebody reached out to him to work on this documentary. I don't know if he was, it's a big time documentary. This documentary, the woman directing it, she also directed that RBG documentary on Hulu.
Oh yeah.
So it's like a pretty big deal. And he's worked on some other documentaries. He's worked on some big stuff before. But to him, this was like the largest thing he's ever worked on.
Which actually, I don't mean to interrupt the narrative, but have you heard the news?
What?
Because you brought up RBG, and obviously RBG recently passed. Our good friend Mr. Connery passed today.
I saw that.
Yeah. Anyways,
it's a bummer. Yeah,
it's a bummer. Please continue. Just thought I'd throw that out for you.
We'll save our Sean Connery, James Bond, best Bond conversation for another mini episode.
Oh man, can't wait to get into that with you. Yeah, let's do that.
But he was talking about how he's never worked on like production. He has been working on bigger productions lately, and how it just feels like in our community here in Tucson, we don't have the capability of really matching with like a Hollywood set. So there's in Hollywood, it's a union state. Arizona's a right to work state.
Right. Yeah.
So right there's huge differences.
Yes.
So absolutely. If you're a grip in California, you have to take classes on safety. You have to be certified to be on set. You have to have, certain gear. It's like there's a way to do things because it's a
standardized.
Union. Right. Yeah. And everybody does it the same way. And it's a big pain in the butt, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I find there's good things I like about it, and then there's things I really can't stand about it.
Sure.
I like worker protection. I like insurance. I like fair rates and compensation, hourly rates that actually have overtime and time and a half. Like all that stuff is great. But if I'm on a set and I can't move a chair because I have to wait for props to come in and do it, and they're on lunch, so now I have to wait an hour for someone to come move a chair, that drives me nuts.
Right. So there's a trade-off, right? Like with these kind of unionized, there's worker protection and there's, kind of fair trade and a lot of stuff, but there's also so much red tape that it actually makes it more of a hassle than it needs to be.
I don't know. If you have time and you have money, then that's fine. If you have to wait an hour for someone, I remember there was this AV event. I was working in Boston, and we had to move some case had wheels on it. We had to take it up the elevator from like the street to like the top floor because it's Boston and it's the city, and for some reason they put the events up high. But I remember one of the people like whispering to me, he's like, "You better get that now if you want it to set up for the rest of the day, because the elevator guy is about to take a break and he's going to be gone for like an hour." And if we didn't have this case for some reason, it would have like slowed down the whole process of. It's like some weird box with all the technical stuff in it.
Wait. So if the elevator guy goes on break, you couldn't possibly bring it into the elevator and then take it up yourself.
Right. We had to wait for the elevator guy to come back. And it was just this. It was the most frustrating union experience I've ever had was there in Boston, because there was a moment where you had to have the stage moved and the union guys couldn't be found in sight. And then we moved the stage and then they get mad at us because we moved the stage. And then they would just hang out and just watch us, and then they would disappear, and then we'd have to wait to have them to do something else, but they magically disappear when work shows up. And it was just like this. It was like the most frustrating union experience I've ever had, but I appreciate unions, and I think there are good parts to them. I just want to say that on the record.
Yeah. Before we get some email that's just like, "Hey, you fucking idiot."
But it's different here in Arizona, being a right to work state. You just say, hey, do you want to work on this for $100?
Yeah.
And people say yes or no, because it's a right to work state. You don't get insurance. You barely get food. It's just it's different here in Arizona, which is fine, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's complicated.
But he was talking about how Arizona is not at that level yet to where we could, if Captain Marvel 4 came to Arizona, our crew wouldn't be equipped enough to really deal with that level of production because we're not standardized.
Got it. Yeah.
We can't work with the crew from California. We can't work with the crew from New York. Even though I believe we have. And he was bringing another story came up in the middle of this story was
didn't they film Transformers or whatever, Transformers 6 over in the boneyard of Davis Monthan?
Oh yeah, but they always bring in their own crew.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So they do these little spot checks. I know Fast and the Furious filmed in Phoenix as well.
You would know that.
Transformers has, they bring in California crew to work on it for a couple days and then they bounce out.
Got it. Okay. So that's just like they're taking their in-house people, moving them over here for just a little while and then going back.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's different.
But then he was talking because he was also complaining about there's this other company in town. I guess I shouldn't name names. So I'm going to not name names. I'm going to avoid names this whole podcast. But if you do some research, I'm sure you can figure out who they are.
Okay.
So there's this other company in town. They're actually across the street from me. They're in the neighborhood across the street from me on Stone, and they have this. They're a equipment rental house / production company.
Okay,
and they have equipment, they have gear. All the local crew that's decent or good is run through them because they're kind of like the centralized hub of production in Southern Arizona.
Sure.
And one of these guys recently on a set, he's a douchey guy. He's kind of a prick. Prick is a good word for him.
Okay.
But he mouthed off to the wrong guy, and this production lost a whole job because of this one guy saying one wrong thing to one person.
Wait. Let me make sure I have the narrative straight. The one guy who is mouthing off is the same guy who was talking to you about how production... No. Okay, no, this is a separate guy. Okay, just keeping track of
yeah. So the guy I was having... his name is Sean. I could say his name. So Sean is my friend that I was talking to about productions in Southern Arizona. And he was telling me that at this other company, there is a new person that just is a prick.
Yeah.
Likes to mouth off to everybody. Every time I've met him, he's been the worst person I've ever met. But he's really good at his job, which is something this company stands behind. If you're really good at your job, it doesn't matter if you're a douchebag or not.
Yeah, I have a few of those. Okay.
And so they lost a job, and the work's been slow lately. Like the only thing happening right now are political ads, and what he lost was a political campaign for this company, and that's huge at this time because that's the only work happening.
At this stage, that would be the work. Like that would be the thing. Yeah.
But it just made me start to think about my relationship with this company and my relationship that I've had with other people in the film community, and how I've kind of, I feel like it wasn't really about burn bridges, but it's more about, I feel like I do burn a lot of bridges, but is it something that I should have done, or should I have played the game longer, or is it a good thing that I've separated myself from what I see as dumpster fires all over town in the film community, even though they're doing decent stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, because I also port that out basically because you are an entrepreneur of your own right, basically starting Elephant Scout and all that kind of stuff. So I port that out to kind of more of a generalized, like less about the film community, but it kind of it's like, when do you make compromise and when do you kind of stick to your guns? And sometimes sticking to your guns or having your certain opinion about something can rub someone the wrong way.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think this is where we could do a review of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, because I think that there's a fair amount in there about this very subject, kind of. But yeah, so, I mean, it especially in these kinds of cases. like if we were to extrapolate kind of what the negatives or what the fear is, right? The fear is that you'll have less collaborators down the line, right?
Right.
And the fear is that you're projecting an image of yourself that says that like, oh, he can't compromise, or he can't work in this other sort of way. He has an uncompromising vision, which can be both a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because it's like they would say the same thing about Stanley Kubrick, and it's a good thing.
Right.
But they can say that about somebody else, and it would be a bad thing. So I guess it kind of depends. I think ultimately what it comes down to is like twofold. Because I also, like, my whole thing, I have similar narratives. My whole thing is about winning right? Like I want to win always, but I also need to balance that out against whatever like morality I inject into the subject is like winning right. And sometimes that does mean cutting people out and to use the phrase burning bridges, so to speak. So I mean, for instance, to kind of give a relatable narrative. I mean, you already know this narrative because you've been around for this period of time. But the company that I work for now, I also worked for from late 2017, like the end of 2017 into 2019. And it came down to the point where, you know, I was doing an excellent job, and this is actually this probably serves as like both a lesson and an example in burning bridges, but then also how to reconcile these. So I worked for this company and I was doing a really great job, but I was in a position that had very low visibility and I was just getting worked to death, and it just wasn't clear where this was going. And to be honest, I own 50% of the reason as to why this all went south, because as with anything, like I always have some sort of impact on what I'm doing. And therefore, because this didn't go the direction that I would have preferred it to, like at least some of that has to do with my influence. But basically I didn't want, you know, I wasn't like holding anyone hostage over a promotion or over a raise or anything like that. In fact, I specifically said when I met with my manager, I was like, look, I don't want a number. I don't want to hold you hostage over anything like this. I just need to know that there's a plan. I need to know that something's, you know, happening here. Otherwise, I'm just kind of sitting in the same seat, and, you know, this isn't what I want for my life. So, you know, we need to figure this part out. And I was basically told that, oh, well, we can't tell you anything, and we blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And to me, that reads as we don't know. Like, we don't know. And meanwhile, I was getting offers from other organizations that were pretty, like, they were firm. They were on paper. They were on an official offer letter that all I had to do was sign. And now I have this whole, like, I have a new path. Uh-huh. So because that answer was unsatisfactory to me, and here was kind of the difference, I think, between where I could have burned a bridge and where I didn't. When I gave my notice, the manager was, like, actively kind of upset and said like, oh, I feel like, she said, I feel misled by you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, how so? And I realized that it was just because I didn't leave that initial meeting where I said, you know, do we have a plan, whatever, because I didn't leave in a huff. I didn't leave all angry. This person thought that like, oh, everything's fine. It's like, no, I'm just professional. Like, I'm not going to throw a fit about not getting what I want, but I'm also not going to sit here and, you know, be taken for granted, basically. It's like, I'm going to do something about it. It doesn't matter to me, like, how you take it necessarily. So that then, of course, was like kind of a poor instance where it kind of seemed like I was going to burn that bridge. And like, because this person was actively saying not aggressive things, but in a business professional tone that evokes like being angry or being upset. You know what I mean? So without saying like, hey, you fucking, you know, whatever, like my manager was basically telling me that like, oh, I feel misled and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. But I just had a formal, you know, I typed out a letter. I gave them a month's notice. I worked until the very last day, and then I left. And then so fast forward to, I think 7 or 8 months after that, and they give me a call back, and they're basically saying like, hey, we really need a person who does this. Not your old job, but we do need somebody who does this, and they came to the table with a deal. And when I came back to the organization, I was very concerned about, several things. I was concerned about the fact that like, oh, am I walking into a trap basically where because they know that I'm a deserter or because I, burned this bridge, they're going to keep me in this new seat now and not promote or not let me grow or not let me do all this kind of stuff. And it didn't actually end up being that way. And the reason why it didn't end up being that way is because I comported myself like very professionally at the time, but also was very firm. So I think that's kind of where that compromise angle comes in, is that no, I'm not going to like you want, I don't think you can compromise your vision for something, especially, you're referencing kind of how you like your life, right? Like filmmaking and how you do a good job at that and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that is everything. So you're not going to compromise against that. But then also how you relate this information or how you treat other people essentially is going to be that difference. So now I'm back into the fold, and there is still a little bit of tension between me and the person who I quit with, but everybody else is fine. Uh-huh. So I'm still a little worried a little bit about, burning bridges. But I think because I actively put in the effort to make it not seem like that, I think that that's not the impression.
I did the complete opposite.
Oh, tell me about it.
I always do the complete opposite of that. I don't know. I guess it can go all the way back to even like 2004, 2005. Mm-hmm. So one of my first big projects here in Tucson was for school. And I was working on, I wrote a Western. It was called Fistful of Ugly.
Okay.
And it was an 8-minute short. And I went to Old Tucson here in town, which is no longer open because of COVID.
Sad.
Also poor management. It was too expensive to shoot there. So I asked around, and a friend, one of my writing instructors was like, you got to talk to this guy. This guy, we should give him a name. I'm not going to name names.
Yeah.
But this guy knows all the guys in town. He's a stunt man. He does Westerns. He's the guy to talk to.
Okay.
And so this guy is a few years older than me. I want to say maybe 3 years older than me. And he went through the same film program that I went through. And everybody thought he was, the next big thing.
He's the be all end all. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially at Pima, there were always like stars of each class, like the person making better stuff in each class.
Right. Yeah.
And him and his friends were the star of their class. And it was three classes before me. So he's a little bit older than me. So I went and talked to him. I was like, hey, I need to make a Western. This is my script. He's like, hey, this is pretty good. I can help you out with this. I can act it in if you want. I have this, I have all this crew. If you want a location that's cheap, go to this place up in Phoenix. And there's like this little tiny Western town, and I think it was in Goodyear. And so I drove, I looked at the location, I met the guy there, and the guy was super nice. I went up with a friend of mine, but he was like this weird eccentric guy. Yeah, he had like rock star hair, like really curly, big hair.
Sure.
And he was like, name dropping left and right, because that's what people do in the film industry. It's always about name dropping, especially here in Arizona. If you can't drop a name, you're a nobody, which is pretty sad. So we're there for like 2 hours. We're scouting locations. We're blocking scenes. We're like, hey, we can shoot this here. We can shoot this there. Can we have a horse here? Can we shoot some guns here with blanks? And he's like, yeah, sure. Whatever you want. Anything like that. So we go through this whole 2-hour meeting. We put a date in the calendar. And as we're leaving, as we're literally walking out the door, the guy goes, oh, don't forget about the insurance thing, your insurance certificate. And I'm like, what? I'm like, all right. And I just left because it was literally as we were walking out the door. So in my head, this isn't a big deal.
Yeah, it was an aside.
Right. Why would why would you not bring that up sooner? Like, why is that not the first thing that you bring up if it's not important?
Yeah.
So I go back to school. I talk to the instructor. And I was like, hey, instructor, they asked me for an insurance certificate. And the instructor was like, no, we only provide that for this one class, but not for your class. And I'm like, all right, well, cool. And then I looked it up. And insurance was like $1,000. I'm like, yeah, Let me call this cool kid that everyone's like, you should talk to this guy. And I'll see what he says. So I said, hey, dude, cool kid. The guy was like, really nice and everything. And we saw the whole location. But like at the end, he like threw away, had this throwaway line of like, we need insurance. It's like, what is up with that? Is that a big deal? And the cool kid was like, no, it's fine. You can shoot there. I'll be there. If he gives you any grief, just have him talk to me. It'll be fine.
And you're like, okay, cool kid.
I'm like, famous last words, right?
Yeah, it'll be fine.
So we get up to the location to shoot. We only have enough money for a day. It was like $500 for the day. And so it's like, which is nothing for this entire Western town. We get there at like 4 a.m. So we have to leave at like 3 a.m, something ridiculous.
Jeez.
And so I get there and the guy's like, hey, where's your insurance certificate? And I'm like, oh, cool guy said I didn't need to worry about it. And he's like, oh, we can't shoot here. You're shut down. You can't shoot here. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. And then cool guy shows up and talks to the guy. And then cool guy like disappears into the dusk light on like this weird bridge location in the middle of this weird Western set. And I'm like, all right, well, we're not shooting today, guys. So we all start packing up our stuff and then we start driving back to Tucson.
Yeah.
So I go to find cool guy, and cool guy is like leaning on this bridge with a friend of his. I think it was his sister or this other girl that is an editor. But he's just like standing there with his hands in his face and he's like crying. And I walk up and all I can hear is say, I try so hard. I try so hard.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, hey dude, we're taking off. Peace. But at this time, the film community was kind of putting all their energy into this one person, this one cool guy.
Yeah.
And like, oh, he's going to be the savior of the film community here in Southern Arizona. And he made a feature and he made some other stuff. But to me, I was like, he was kind of a douchebag.
I mean, it's a little loony.
Yeah. So instead of being, diplomatic and nice and saying thank you, I said all that stuff.
Yeah.
But from that day forward, to me, he's been known as, in my head, tight pants douchebag. Because he always wears
that guy.
Yeah. Because he always wears Wranglers that are a little on the tight side.
The snug side.
And he's a douchebag. So I always called him tight pants douchebag. And I'm not ashamed to call him tight pants douchebag. I probably wouldn't call him that to his face. I probably would if the circumstances were proper. Mm-hmm. But everyone I know that has worked with him, I tell them that's my nickname for him. And no one has ever said, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't call him that.
Yeah.
Everyone always laughs at it. So it's like truth.
It's probably a decently accurate read. So how has that interaction, let me, instead of starting with that question, has that interaction come back to be problematic for you in
I guess only
future
in
productions,
and like in like the morality sense of it all, and like my ego sense of it all. So that production company that's across the street from me, that lost the political ad, that's like the big production hub in town. Mm-hmm. Back in 2005, it was owned by this other guy named Ron Misty, and Ron Misty was like a key grip in LA. He was like a key grip on Logan's Run, like the 1970s movie of the version of The Island. I don't know if you've ever seen The Island.
I have.
But he sold his company, and Tight Pants Douchebag came across some money somehow magically and was able to purchase this company and kind of became the owner of this rental house hub place.
Okay.
So in theory, if I needed to rent a bunch of gear for a large production, I could go through this company. And it could be a strained relationship there.
Yeah.
So I've never dealt with them personally, but people I have worked with on set have dealt with them, and it's worked out fine.
So, I mean, this is kind of the thing, especially with, kind of the younger entrepreneur population, sort of like that's kind of more the angle that's concerning, right? Because you're bound to ruffle feathers with your own individual work style. And especially if you're the kind of go-getter that's trying to start your own company or trying to make your own product or try to do your own thing, like you're bound to kind of be pushing against somebody, even somebody as like Preston, where it doesn't seem like anything he's doing, but what happens when he is actually stepping on someone's toes just because they're inventing the same kind of game as somebody else? You know, like no matter what you do, we don't exist in a vacuum. I think that's the reality that we have to come to terms with, is that we don't exist in a vacuum. So no matter what, any actions that we do that might have consequence to others can be perceived both positively and negatively. I think the concern for most, kind of younger entrepreneurs and that sort of thing, especially, what I've experienced earlier in my career and stuff like that, some pretty interesting choices that I've made. You end up, I don't want to say that it's natural or that it's going to happen, but it kind of seems like it will anyways. You know what I mean? Like it. Because the idea, especially if you're, someone San Francisco is pretty much over. But earlier, that was the hub, that was the tech hub for anything. And people moved to San Francisco to be an entrepreneur the way people moved to LA to be an actor or moved to New York to be a writer. Uh-huh. You see what I'm saying? It's like that was the hub for that sort of thing. And it was less about being discovered, but it was more that, oh, here's the place where I can go and everyone's favorite word, network, and, meet people. And once I tell them, I pitch them my idea, and now maybe I have an investor, and now, all this kind of stuff. That kind of story that narrative is just rife with the ability to be burning bridges or doing something like that if you're not exceptionally careful, because you're going to, try and get an investor who thinks, or even, to use a narrative of my own as a microcosm, like I'm doing this project right now that to me should be roughly 5 to 10% of my time, because this project is very non-essential. It is not anything to me that moves the needle, but somebody came to me and had a whole bunch of ideas about how they wanted to change things in our internal systems, like actually how we do stuff. And I said that is not exactly a possibility because all these software changes, blah, 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 tech stuff. But what I did say, I was like, look, what we can do is we can because it sounds like this is a problem that can be solved either through systems or it can be solved through training other people. So what we can do is we can just start this monthly initiative where we're we're kind of sending out these new system updates, and here's the preferred method, and here's a walkthrough of like how you should be doing this. And that and that was fine, and we started on this project, right? But yet somehow, and I suspect I suspect that this other person that I'm collaborating with just has way more free time than I do, or maybe isn't as interested in their main job as I am, or isn't as sunk in as deep or something like that, because they are just scheduling meetings constantly. They're changing their ideas of what they want this thing to represent. They're saying, oh, well, we need to pull in, and they use buzzwords constantly that drives me up the wall, where they're saying like, oh, we need content from all these different people, and let's set meetings with all these different teams individually so we can get content from them. And then at the end of the month, we'll have a content review meeting with each of these entities. And it's like, hey, this is taking up so much time. And so I'm trying to be polite, but I'm finding myself more and more aggravated every single time that it's like, look, I signed on to help because I'm good at the technical aspects of what we're trying to do here. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I'm writing up a bunch of stuff. You're setting a whole bunch of meetings that you're committing us to that we're asking people for content, and nobody wants to do that because nobody wants to take the time to write up stuff. So ultimately, I'm writing up stuff. I built the format, because we had to build this in an Outlook template, and this person didn't know how to do that. So then I had to figure out, I watched YouTube videos until I could figure out, oh, okay, I'm going to stage this in Photoshop basically and make it look all pretty and then build that into a custom Outlook template and then, blah, blah, blah. So it's like I'm doing all this legwork for something that, you're setting meetings and just occupying my time.
Right.
And then every time that I'm submitting something that's like, oh, it's like a technical specification of how you need to get into this system to look at, whatever. And then you keep bringing up things like, oh, should we be doing more about, surveys or interviews with people or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this to me represented 5 to 10% of my time, not, I'm not trying to get near to 50% or whatever you're trying to do. Like, this is insane. So, in that kind of sense, it's sort of the similar thing where it's like, look, now as a result of doing a project with another person, inevitably you are going to have differences in opinion. You're going to have different stylistic, like I like to work this way, whereas this person likes to work that way. Like that stuff is natural. For me, it would be quite painless or just, nothing would really happen if I just said, okay, I'm out. Like, I don't want to do this anymore, whatever. But and that's because I kind of have my other stuff that's also working, whatever. But if you're an entrepreneur and you end up taking on an investor or you end up, getting a new partner or you end up doing something, it's like that can have deep set consequences, not only just to your product, your company, your, whatever it is, because you run the risk of changing things or doing something the way that you don't like to or anything like that. But also then the alternative is if you kick this person out, which happens all the time, like dynasty changes in San Francisco happen all the time. You know what I mean? Like all these tech startups have people in and out and in and out and in and out. Like people mostly do 6-month rotations in these tech startups and they don't actually land anywhere. And now you run the risk of, oh, well, that person is actually a really good friend of this high-end investor, and now you're definitely not getting funding from them. And that kind of stuff. So it's just a lesson in being able to like, I think the risk or the run rate for yourself is low. Like you said, because look, you could go through this gear rental company basically, or do they also do like crew stuff, or is it just? Yeah,
they do a lot of crew stuff. They do a lot of local productions. They do if anything big coming through town, they go to them first. Yeah. Even if it's like photo shoots, they all go through them first.
Yeah. So I mean, you are running the risk of basically like either having awkward, work level interactions or potentially not being sourced through them, or not like they might not want to work with you. But at the same time, you're in a sense, you're protecting your own projects or your own stuff, because you know what kind of people that you would work with and what kind of behavior that you would tolerate when doing a production and what you won't.
Right.
So it's like it's this kind of fine line where you want to please everybody, but at the same time, if you're just willing to, like, for instance, think about your feature, Eddie Mummy. If this was the kind of stuff that was going on, or actually more importantly, the shorts, the murder mystery shorts, those were, at least from an outsider's opinion, I have no idea, but it seemed like those were on a really tight deadline.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you had all this stuff going on simultaneously. You were shooting the shorts, but then also figuring out the live component and like all these different things going on together. So it's like you don't have the time budget nor the money budget to show up on site and then be like, oh, well, we're not shooting today. We're fucking bailing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a fine line between like working well with other people, but then also, not letting your project or your business or whatever be completely compromised by the poor work ethic of others, essentially.
Right. I mean, the more I've looked at all the bridges that I've burned, I mean, I could tell 2 other stories.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to not meshing mostly with personalities.
Yeah.
And just not wanting to work with this douchebag that doesn't really treat people well, has a reputation for not being easy to work with. Mm-hmm. Why would I want to work with a person like that? There's someone else. There's 2 people like that. There's 2 douchebags that I've worked with, that I've burned bridges with. And I'm like, if I never work with them again, I'm fine.
That's fine. Yeah.
And then one was just kind of just creepy. It was just like really weird. He was like really attached to me and wanted to be like best friends in a weird way. And I'm like, stay away from me. This is weird. But it's more of a. But if you look at their successes, they've had way more successes on a public platform, I guess you could say, on a popular platform. Mm-hmm. If you look at the list of companies the company across the street has worked on, they've worked with huge names that I guess you could associate with success. Mm-hmm. There's this other person that I worked with that does rope tricks. You know, he's had a lot of success. I helped him with the short film at the beginning of the year, and it's like a 250,000 views on YouTube right now. Wow. And so we had a little blowout in the middle of a Starbucks, which was hilarious. But he's just someone I just never want to work with again, just because of the way he was treating people. And and this whole process of trying to, you know, you can get lost in this idea of what success is, you know, unlike what your parents basically say is success.
Right.
Like if you have a movie that is number one in the box office, you know, lots of people can associate that with success. Mm-hmm. Versus making something that somebody wants to watch over and over again. You know, even though it might not be number one in the box office or 250,000 views, you can still say I had a positive screening with an audience of 300 people. Yeah. You know, I can connect with an audience that way. And it's just, you can get lost in this perception of what success is and whether or not you should be hopping on other people's coattails just to get a taste of it or continue to do the hard work to do it on your own. Yeah. And it's just, it's a weird thing to process as you're going through your career, looking back at choices you've made, looking back at decisions you've made and small successes you've had and big ones. And does it really, like, where is it going to, like, what, I guess what I need to do is define what I see for myself as success and then focus on that versus being derailed by a stupid conversation in my friend's garage about the projection company across the street being the only company in town that can compete with the Hollywood version film set.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of the thing. At the end of the day, you're not really going to have to answer to anyone but yourself.
Right.
I mean, that's just the truth of it, right? Because I have this conversation with myself actually a lot in a different context, but there are certain things that, you know, you never know when you're, because also burning a bridge doesn't necessarily come in only in this format where it's like a one-to-one person-to-person sort of thing. It comes in many sorts of formats. Like, for instance, oh wait, you know what? Never mind. I can't talk about that on a podcast.
It's, so we both know this guy. He works out at the gym you used to attend here in Tucson.
Oh, yeah. How do I already know who you're talking about?
And he's this really angry guy.
Yes, he's very angry. Yep, we're talking about the same person.
And so he dated one of the actors from the Mummy movie for like a week.
Without saying the person's name, give me the character's name.
Tiffany.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I saw them out at a movie once, and I thought it was strange that they were together. And then Tiffany. It's
an odd pairing.
It is an odd pairing. But I guess if like I've known him for a while and his previous person that he was dating, and he has a type. Let's just say that. He has a type.
Sure.
So let's just say they dated for like a week, and they didn't have an amicable split. He was very angry and upset. And so apparently one of the things that he did was he sent a picture of a person hanging lynched on fire from a bridge to Tiffany.
So that's a literal burning bridge.
Right. And she had the best response before she blocked him. And I thought it stuck with me for a long time. Because this was like, it's just like years ago. And her response was, burn bridges, light my way. And then she blocked him. Wow. And it was just like, oh, that's a really smart way to look at it.
Yeah, that is a smart way to look at it. I think that there's several there's like a lot of ways to deal with these kinds of things, and I think maybe Tiffany had the right idea there, right? Because especially as you go through your professional career, I don't want to say it's inevitable to kind of have these clashes or have these stylistic clashes or to not get along with someone or to sometimes even burn a bridge. I would personally say that that's inevitable, but then again, I don't know. Maybe some people are a little bit more compromising and some people are a little bit more pleasant to be around than myself. So, maybe that doesn't happen to some people. But for instance, with myself, there are even certain career paths that I can no longer be in. You know what I mean? Like not no longer be in, but there's, without getting specific, because this was the story I was going to tell, but then I realized that I technically signed an NDA, so I can't, I talk about it with you because you and I are just two people talking about it, but I'm not going to put it on a broadcast that can be downloaded. You see what I'm saying? But essentially for a period of time, or I went out for a job that has very high and specific selection criteria, and I actually met you just after this period of time, or maybe around this period in time is when you and I kind of met each other, and I was all set to get the job. Like I basically had a 2 month or like a month, 2 month, period of time where I was not officially selected for the job, but then became officially selected for the job. But then when it came down to it, it was basically putting me in a place, it just wasn't under favorable conditions. And at the time, I was only 22 or 23. And so I, declined for, several reasons. But this company had already kind of invested some time and some money into me, and they completely did not expect anyone to say no. Mm-hmm. They didn't expect anyone to get through that month or 2 months and then be like, no, I'm good. Like, thank you. Because they only presented the official offer at the end.
Of course.
Right. And it wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a like, okay, here's what, blah, blah, blah. It was just more of like an appointment. And, I regret making the decision that I did now because it turns out that this line of work or this thing is actually like suited towards my mentality and like what I do. Although I'm not really sure what the career growth from there. I mean, a lot of things were problematic. But now it's, I had the discussion with Tori about, oh yeah, that would be an interesting, I saw a post on LinkedIn for not the position that I would have gotten with this company, but a senior position. And the money was ludicrous. Like,
was it?
Just insane. Like, a senior position of whatever this vague thing that I'm talking about, it was posted at like $250K.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, okay. I mean, how many years does it take to become a senior person in this? Probably, whatever. It's like, wow, I could have been, if I had started at that same time and fast forward to now, because now so if I was 23 at the time, I'm turning 29 now. So that would have been 6 years doing this job. I maybe would have accelerated into this, position. So I kind of had this FOMO, as the kids say, or whatever about that. And it's just one of those things that, they're not going to accept me now because I said no. There's no way, if you probably already know what I'm specifically talking about, but there's no way in that career field that if you've said no and you've walked away from it, that they would ever take you again. Like that, it's just how it is, right? But so there's this great essay for any listeners. I think I've told Chris about this many times, so he's probably going to roll his eyes when I say the name of this essay. But there's this great essay by Paul Graham. He's one of the founders of Y Combinator, so he's one of these startup, geniuses and all that kind of stuff. But he's also an essayist. He's also a professor. This guy, Paul Graham, he wrote this essay about staying upwind and how you don't want to get so specialized so early on in your career that you can no longer, pivot, or you can no longer get into other kind of things. And I think that same essay, the spirit of that essay, can also be applied towards burning bridges and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You don't kind of want to make these decisions, these hardline decisions that early on until you really kind of figure out what you're doing. But I do think it's also important to, have an uncompromising vision. Don't be that person who's willing to waffle on everything. And even though you feel something is wrong, you'll do it anyways and all this kind of stuff. I would say you've definitely burned a bridge, but I also wouldn't say feel bad about it.
Oh,
Like,
I don't.
Of course you don't. Of course you don't. But that's sort of the thing. It's like once you figure out, and that's kind of the thing about growing up. And if you're in the younger kind of early phase of your career, you're in your early 20s, you have a lot of figuring out to do. So it wouldn't behoove you to burn bridges necessarily that young, because you don't know what you're going to end up wanting to do or who you're going to want to do it with. It might turn out that this person that you're very critical of or that you're clashing with, they might end up being right. You never know.
Right.
That said, you don't want to. So this, I'll finish with an anecdote that's not mine, but one that I can actually tell the details of, because I'm sure the previous one was frustrating as fuck because people are just like, I have no idea what he's talking about. But Matthew McConaughey is on this. Oh, that's why I brought it up. Matthew McConaughey is on this recent push because he has a book coming out, Green Lights. I haven't read it, so I don't know if it's good or not, but it might be interesting. And I'm a big McConaughey fan. I'm just going to come out and say that right off the top. I like the way he thinks. I like the stuff that he does. Sure, he had that period of time. I like the fact that he can be funny and kind of self-deprecating about that period of time where he was just the shirtless guy in rom-coms.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like, he openly talks about that like, yeah, I wasn't serving myself best, and I wasn't doing, whatever. But he had this great commencement speech for, I think, UT Austin, somewhere in Texas. I think it was UT Austin. And in that commencement speech, he talks about how he got his first, kind of role where he was making like $300 a day, that he was on set. He was very excited. It was Richard Linklater with Dazed and Confused. And, they just kept bringing him back because he was only supposed to be there for a certain amount of days. He plays kind of a smaller role in it, Wooderson. All right, that kind of stuff. And he says that, they kept saying like, oh, he was great. And would he want to come back and do more? And he was like, hell yeah, like give me more days on set. He's making $300 a day. He's having a blast. But upon review, a recent review at the time of the commencement speech, so now that's probably who knows how old, but at a time of recent review, so later on in his career, he was watching the film and he realized that there were scenes that he was not supposed to be in. That there's this point in time where Wooderson was going to go and get some Aerosmith tickets, and he asks people, hey, anyone want to come ride with or whatever? And he's got one guy who's coming with, but then no, everyone else is like, nah, we're good, whatever. And he says, all right. And he exits, screen left or screen right. I don't know what the fucking, But then he comes back and says, hey, y'all sure that you don't want to go, whatever. And what McConaughey is saying is like what he realized later in life, because at the time he was just stoked to be on screen more. He was stoked to be acting more. He was stoked to be, getting more money. But what he realized is that scene shouldn't have existed. The character is not the type to think like, oh, I need to go back and ask. I need to, he's a person who's so sure of himself that he asks once and he doesn't look back. He doesn't falter. He doesn't stutter step. He just goes. Mm-hmm. And that's the character. And so the scene is a disservice to the film and to the character because it completely acts against what that person would be like. And I think that that's kind of the same thing with, this topic of burning bridges and all that kind of stuff, is that like, you don't want to, just be completely okay and be callous with just like cutting people off and just, I'm headstrong, I'm doing whatever. But you also don't want to compromise on that vision either. Like, you don't want to have that scene. And obviously, if you're not a film person, if you work, in something else, if you work in tech or whatever, it would obviously be something else. But you don't want that scene that doesn't make sense for what you're trying to do. Like, you don't want that. So don't necessarily just be, wildly cutting people out of your life and burning bridges, because you never know when an opportunity will arise again. But don't compromise entirely on your vision. And that's a tough thing to balance, especially for young entrepreneurs. But, that's the thing. It's like, it kind of seems like it's more about consistency than anything else.
Right.
In a vague sort of sense.
Right. Well, yeah. I guess it's about consistency and confidence in your consistency.
Consistency and confidence in your consistency. I like that. Let's put that on a shirt.